Before we get started, I just have to wonder, what did you think about, like, the gimmick of, like, showing things backwards, interacting with things going forward?
I think you're right in that it's a gimmick.
Right.
Completely unnecessary.
Hard to follow. Confusing.
Kind of full of itself.
For the sake of for the sake of confusing the audience so that he could feel superior. I thought it was a cheap trick and below Nolan's filmmaking ability.
It's below anyone's filmmaking ability.
Agreed. Anyone who would do something like that.
No self-respecting artist.
Exactly. Total hack move. Hello and welcome to the Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rude. I am Phil Rude. I'm the dad.
I'm Austin Rude. I'm the son, and I'm also the reason we had to take last week off.
Water under the bridge, my friend.
Just wanted to address it.
Yeah.
I was sick. We're better now.
It's been a really weird month. I did talk about this a little bit on Twitter. Thank you for everybody who reached out and supported our decision to take the time, take care of ourselves, get healthy. But
I'm glad our employers could give us the week off.
I am glad we have people who aren't shouting at us and accusing us of pod fading and flaking out. That our listeners are great and supportive of us needing a little bit of time and understanding that life happens. This has been a hectic, busy month. We have people from out of town. Logan's graduating. Some stuff around the house has been neglected and needing to be done.
My work year's ending, so it's getting busier.
End of work year. My work year is still busy, and then you got sick, and we've missed a couple of weeks here recently. We're doing our best to stay on top of it, but such is life.
Things happen.
Exactly.
And our first season was, filmed in a pandemic year. I feel like things are are cropping up now.
It's a little bit slower, maybe. Yeah. I think that's fair. In our last couple of week gap, what have you been up to? What have you been watching? Consuming.
There's a lot. I actually don't know what to pinpoint.
Okay. I'll throw something at you in a minute. Let me just run down.
Okay.
A couple of my things. I watched the Star Wars Clone Wars, the Genndy Tartakovsky 2-dimensional micro series.
Right, not the
before the big Clone
Mandalorian
Wars.
prequel.
I just watched that this week, and I haven't seen that in years. It's great. It's on Disney Plus. And I started rewatching season 8 of The Simpsons because Zeng This talked me into that.
Season 8 specifically.
Season 8 specifically, and there is a reason. It's referenced in a recent Zeng This episode I did about Jurassic Park 3.
Okay.
Where an episode from that came up, and we're diving in. So yes, I also watched Jurassic Park 3. And it is as boring as I remember it being.
Well, they can't all be great.
Exactly. But the one thing that I wanted to shout out specifically that I know you watched, because I caught a little bit of it too, is a show called Kim's Convenience.
That's right, yeah.
Are you watching? Is that on Netflix?
It is on Netflix. It's a Canadian show made by the CBC. It's like their broadcasting corporation. And it's just like this fun little comedy. Like,
it's a family of Korean immigrants who run a convenience store, right?
Yeah, they're first, second generation.
Right.
And like, it's a mix of their culture, but like that's not really like the focus of the show. It's just kind of there.
This is what I wanted to talk about, is why this show struck me. First of all, with a very couple exceptions, I've not laughed at a sitcom the way I laughed at this one in a long time. This is a really like legitimately funny show.
It's a lot of like subtle physical comedy.
Right.
So like the first time I watched it, actually, because I tried watching it over a year ago and I just didn't get into it.
Right.
After the first few episodes, I was like, nothing's happening. But then I was just flipping through Netflix and I was like, okay, I'll put it on again. And like this time it caught me and I was like, it being nothing is the point.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I'm enjoying it a lot.
See, now you get what Seinfeld was 20 years ago, was just the mundane everyday life, and look how ridiculous this is.
That's right. This is Korean
Korean
Seinfeld. What's the deal with Korean airport food?
What's the deal with Korean barbecue? No, it's the thing that struck me about it besides that, and I've heard people talk about this show for a while, but just because I don't watch sitcoms, I haven't seen it. And I thought it would be something like Fresh Off the Boat, which I don't particularly enjoy. I know Fresh Off the Boat has a fan base. I just don't think it's that funny. I think Randall Park is funny on his own. Something about that show just doesn't gel with me.
Yeah, it's in line with like
it's a very playing it safe kind of network sitcom.
Right.
But I really was struck by, like, this show is about Korean immigrants and first-generation American kids and the culture clash there. And that's the only time that this show is about race or culture at all. It's not like we're discriminated against, we're this, we're that, it's not like, look at us, we're being diverse. It's none of these, like, corporate checkbox things. It's just a sitcom that takes place in this sort of Korean immigrant community.
Right.
And it takes these stereotypes of immigrant store owners. And this struck me as particularly brilliant, because I think a lot of times people are, let's steer clear of these stereotypes. I've delivered to Asian immigrant liquor stores, convenience stores for a long time. A lot of those stereotypes are in place because they're based on some very real sort of generalizations that actually do exist.
Well, it's like the same way we generalize about like Depression era old people like hoarding things, right, or like being stingy. Like it's the same thing. It's part of the culture.
People who come from
and immigrating that gives you these values.
Let me finish so it doesn't sound like I go, yeah, all stereotypes are true.
No.
Because what this show does, instead of being afraid to have these stereotypes there, they kind of lean in and go, yeah, these are real, but also these people are like fully fleshed out people as well. They're not only these stereotypes. They're showing. What Kim's Convenience is doing is showing, like, yeah, these are three-dimensional people. Yes, some of these stereotypes are real, but there's a person behind this. He's a shopkeeper. Yes, that's a stereotype in and of itself. He's a shrewd businessman. He's a little stingy. He's this, he's that. He's also a father who loves his children. He's also a member of this community. He's a member of this church. He's and it's just, I think it does a great job of portraying an immigrant family and all the fully realized things that go into that. It's a fully three-dimensional portrayal of this immigrant family that also happens to be very funny.
I think that's what you get when you get an actual immigrant writing your show.
Right.
And I think that's what this is. I'm not positive, but like I very much doubt.
There's no way this is an outsider perspective on that, because like I'm saying, I can see from the outside some of these stereotypes that are true, and I can also see that these are people, but I don't know the mechanics of like an immigrant community in a city. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the dynamics that work within that. But I do find it very interesting that all those dynamics are there without the show being preachy or without it feeling like a corporate checklist of diversity. It's just a very organically funny show about immigrants.
Right.
And I was really struck by it. I was very surprised how much I enjoyed the show. I'm glad you were watching it and that I just kind of wandered in.
Yeah, it was just on the TV.
Yeah.
And you kind of sat down and you just stayed there. I felt like you weren't planning to.
No, exactly. That's exactly right. And I just ended up watching a few episodes and I'm like, this is a really funny show. This is really good.
Mm-hmm. You should have seen, you missed out on the episode where there's like this white savior teacher that the daughter has in her college, and she goes into the store and like her child is just a complete, like, he's not parented. So the dad is mean to the child, and so the white savior thinks that he's abusive and like gives her better grades, and it's a whole thing.
Like the overly liberal, I don't give my kid boundaries kind
right.
of thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's, I think I'm helping.
Right.
But
yeah. That's
really
funny.
just pandering.
I'll probably see it because I feel like this is one of those shows like The Office that I find genuinely funny. And you can also just turn it on and it's in the background and you're watching, you're listening to it, you're experiencing the show, and it's not demanding a ton of attention from you. And you can still like really enjoy it on all its levels. So
yeah, I realized that like American sitcoms recently, like they're all about like these big character arcs, like Superstore, like
right.
It's nothing major. Like I like more The Good Place, where it's like this is a story, it just happens to be a sitcom.
Right.
But like I also like this, where it's like, this is a sitcom.
It's a sitcom, right.
Don't look for anything deeper. It's just this picture of life.
It's not like, there's not going to be a huge reveal at the end of it.
Right.
It's just going to, like, that was people, to take it back to Seinfeld. When Seinfeld ended, people expected this giant, grand finale. And it's like, this is a week-to-week sitcom. There are jokes that run throughout it, but it's sort of like, like, this isn't Avengers Endgame, which wasn't a reference anyone was making at the time, but like, you know what I mean? Like, there is no like grand, huge finale to this.
I feel like with Seinfeld, it's like the only way to end that is to just imply that this friend group continues being friends, and that's kind of it.
Kind of. They did a weird twist at the end, but it wasn't like
it was all a dream.
It wasn't. That would have been great though. It's Newman's dream.
I don't know who Newman is, so
anyway,
the joke is lost on me.
All right, I'll watch Kim's Convenience if you watch Seinfeld.
All right, well,
the sitcom exchange program. We're born. It's being born out of this show.
What did we watch this week?
On a completely different take from Kim's Convenience or anything like that, we watched the 2020 science fiction spy action film Tenet. This movie features a CIA operative known as the Protagonist, who is recruited by an agency called Tenet to go on a mission that unfolds beyond real time. The film stars John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, Kenneth Branagh, Dimple Kabadia, and Michael Caine.
Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. It was written and directed by Christopher Nolan, and this movie is insane.
That's a word to describe it, I guess.
It's not insane. There's a very sound logic to this movie. This movie's a little hard to follow, though.
It's not as hard to follow, I think, as what's the other one? Inception.
Really? You think so?
I think so.
Wow.
Maybe it's because I'm a time travel guy. Like, I like time travel
I
stuff.
like time travel as well, yeah.
So, like, I was kind of able to follow most of this movie.
I think Inception is deceptively simple. I think it seems like it's confusing, but it's actually pretty straightforward. And I think this movie is very similar. I watched this movie twice, and the second time around, it clicked in place much more. So I think this is a movie that is a little erratic. Mm-hmm. It's a little crazy. It's a little confusing. But on multiple viewings, I think things start to fall into place a little bit better. And I think Inception is very similar. I think the more I watched Inception, the more I have realized how simple that movie actually is. Like, it has levels to it, but the plot of it is pretty linear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just the way it's set up is strange.
It is.
Hard to follow. With this, I feel like the sci-fi aspects of it were simple to follow, but the spy stuff completely lost me. And that's partly because I just don't watch spy movies. Like,
right.
I don't get anything out of them mostly, but yeah, I had some issues with this movie.
The spy stuff, I get it, because there's a lot of double crosses and things like that. It is a little more complicated than, like, your standard James Bond plot.
Right.
Because essentially what this movie is, plot-wise, is James Bond. I mean, John David Washington is playing a version of James Bond, the badass who's also a very put-together gentleman and a smooth talker and kind of undercover, even though he's very obviously a spy and trying to be best friends with the most evil man in the world. That's what this is. And then Nolan puts time travel in that. And that's the only thing that separates this from being a James Bond movie.
And I think that's why I have issue with this, is that it's not a time travel movie. It's wasted time travel. There's so much potential in this movie that isn't tapped into, and it bothers me.
Okay. Outside of just being a science lesson, what do you think is missing from the time travel? Because I feel like there is a lot of things that are tapped into.
Well, okay, so they introduce a lot of concepts that they don't pay up on. Like, okay, so first off, I think they should have done the switch into the inverted world, like, halfway through. That should have been the halfway point of this movie, rather than, like, the last act. When he's trying to save the abused wife.
Mm-hmm.
I think that should have happened earlier. But more so, like, they introduce concepts like you can't breathe when you're in an inverted state.
Right.
And if you touch your former self, you'll die. And, like, they don't show any of that. Or, like, they even say, like they say something about, like, the inverted bullets are more dangerous. Like, you're gonna die.
Right.
But that just kind of becomes a plot point. We see it happen, but we don't see, like, how it's more dangerous. Like, they don't show us, like, oh my god, she's, like, horribly, like...
I think it's they do talk about, like, it's the radiation or something, because the inverted things are irradiated.
Okay.
So, like, there is some mention of that. What my big thing where they don't follow up is when he first goes to Tenet and they have the bullets, the bullets that come up like from the table.
Yeah.
And they're wearing like these thick gloves because they're irradiated bullets. And then, like, there's no radiation protection for the entire rest of the movie. He's going in the machine, he's getting inverted, he's getting full-on doses of radiation, and he's just like, yeah, I'm good.
I guess.
They just run around with it like, oh no, this is totally cool. No, I think some of that stuff, like the air, is there, and this is where I think the real genius of this movie and the time travel mechanics are. The air is introduced as you have to have air, and that gives him an excuse to have to be wearing the gas mask when he fights himself later, which is actually earlier, where he doesn't know it's him. And that sort of way to, because otherwise he'd be like, well, why would he hide his face? And it just is sort of, I don't know. I feel like that's something that was in there. I didn't feel like any of this stuff that necessarily... Oh, also Robert Pattinson had to have his face hidden at the very end.
Yeah. When he was
shot in the face.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, Robert Pattinson, if you still hate Robert Pattinson because he did vampire movies 20 years ago, you need to go watch some Robert Pattinson movies. He is great in this movie.
I don't know what else he's been in, but yeah, he's good.
Right, like watch this movie for starters. You know what I mean? He's done a bunch of stuff. He's done a bunch of like indie movies and things like that as well.
Okay.
Robert Pattinson's good. I understand a lot of people wrote him off as like, oh, he's the vampire kid. Those movies are stupid, therefore he is stupid. Him and Kristen Stewart have both done a ton of shit since then, and they're both fine actors.
It's so weird how, like, we hate the actors for that.
It really is. Yeah.
Like, there's no other franchise I can think of like that. Like,
no, we go the other way, where people expect Robert Downey Jr. to actually be Tony Stark. And it's like, Robert Downey Jr. has this huge body of work. He's not Tony Stark. He's an actor. He's playing a role, you know what I mean? And then all anybody really wants to see him, like Tom Holland does these other movies, and they're like, no, he's Spider-Man. I don't want to see him play this killer. And it's like, he's an actor. He's going to do different things.
He's really trying to avoid that.
We really pigeonhole people in good ways and bad ways. But I think Robert Pattinson was super charming in this movie. Super dry, very, very spy-like, and very fun. I thought he was a really fun addition to this movie as the sidekick.
He had like a personality to things.
Yeah. And he was a good wrinkle in that, like you called it way early.
That he was hired by him.
Right. He's recruited in the past, and it's like, oh my God, and really on the second watch, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, those breadcrumbs are from the very beginning.
He knew his drink order.
Right. It was one of those things I'm like, of course, I'm so dumb. How did I not see this? It's like watching Fight Club a second or third time, and you go, oh my God, they practically tell you at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And see, that's where my sci-fi knowledge comes in, because Doctor Who has that exact plot line. Like, the Doctor meets his wife, and she dies, but he has all of the rest of his future is her past, and like, so they meet in the wrong order, but like, it's the same as this movie where they become best friends, and then he dies, but he has him in the past.
I think that's great. I think the way they say goodbye in this movie is, it's heartbreaking, and also like forward looking too, because you know, like, oh, you get to meet him again.
And I think he knows what's coming. I think he knows
he totally
he's
knows
die.
He totally knows what's coming. That's the heartbreaking part of that, is you see him wrestle with that when he tells him goodbye. He's like, can we prevent things? And I kind of think Robert Pattinson's character, Neil, I think he knows he's going to die too.
That's what I mean. I
thought you meant the protagonist knows he's going to die. Yeah.
Obviously he knew, but like, I think
he knows he's going off to die, and he's like, yeah, we've had this adventure through time.
I'll see you in the past.
Right. You'll see me again. Don't worry. And it's a really it's a really wild. It says so much about his character that he just accepts fate. That he doesn't really believe in the free will of things. That things that happen just happen, and no matter what you do with the time.
Yeah.
Which is the, I think, really interesting wrinkle of the time travel in this movie is it's just sort of like a mechanical process that's already predetermined.
Right. I kind of like the end. See, that's the thing is the first half of this movie I hate. The second half I love.
Why do you hate the first half of this movie?
Because its only job is like being, I don't know, it only works on a second viewing, I think. Like watching it the first time, it was so it's just exposition.
It's slow.
For future
it's all set up. Yes.
Right. And it's like, you haven't given me a reason to care about this story. You haven't given me, like, there's the opera scene at the beginning. That's kind of cool.
It is cool.
They break that violin, which is heartbreaking, and it's like a split-second thing, but I...
No, it is!
I will...
When he throws the cello down and stomps it, I go, man, that's like thousands of dollars right there, and that instrument's probably old as shit, too. Like...
Yeah, it was sad. It's the saddest thing in this movie. But, I don't know, like, it just didn't grab me. I think it was... I think it was mainly, like, the overload of spy stuff that I wasn't following. Okay. Until the second half of the movie. So maybe if I rewatch it. But, like, I still think a movie's job in the beginning is to grab you on a first viewing. And if it doesn't do that, maybe it does it for other people. But I think overall this movie, like, a lot of people aren't going to grab on to the beginning.
I think that's fair. Because I think if a movie can't get its hook in... I don't think it's necessarily a movie's job to do that. But I do think it works in a movie's favor if it can do that. For me, it did grab a hold of me because I think John David Washington was so charismatic in this movie. Mm-hmm. He's so cool. I mean, he looks good in a suit. He's walking around doing spy shit. He's, they're reverse bungee jumping up there to the... And I liked that reveal where she's like, no, I'm the arms dealer.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
I know, I'm talking in fragments of movie here, and anyone who has not watched this movie doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about. But that whole scene in India where he first meets Neil and they reverse bungee jump, I'm like, that's a cool sequence.
It is.
And then you add in, like, all the heist stuff. There's, like, 9 heists in this movie.
And I only understood what was happening in, like, 2 of them. I wrote down a note that, like, what was it? That I followed, one of the heists, but not the uranium one.
Okay.
Because they didn't explain what was, they just went straight into it.
There was no planning, they just go, we're gonna need 4 trucks and a fast car.
Yeah, but when they broke into, like, the art dealership or whatever, like, yes, that was
the Freeport. Yes,
yeah, that I understood what was happening.
The Freeport, they told me that the structure of them both was different. I liked that they didn't show you the uranium heist, that they didn't show the planning of that we had to just go along with it, and then as it came together, you're like, oh, cool, this, I get it now. And the way they structured the Freeport one was, we're going to talk about the planning of it as we're cutting to flashbacks of Neil going through it and explaining the layout. And I love that heist movie stuff. You're right. That is a better one. It builds attention. And
I think more effort was put into it because it's also tied into the future of the movie where they go there again and break in and it's them.
And because
them fighting them.
Nolan likes big practical effects set pieces, and he got to crash a fucking plane into a hangar.
That's really true.
Movie, which was, I'm not gonna lie, as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, this is his version of The Dark Knight, flipping the semi over, or whatever big set pieces he likes to do, and he's just playing, but as it's playing out, I'm like, okay, this is really badass.
Someone give him some more toys because it's fun to watch.
I loved it. I loved that scene. I loved that set piece.
I love how they introduced that too. How he tells them, so I have an idea for how we're going to create a distraction. And like, he's like, that's the theatrical part is like, no, it's going to be a big plane.
Yeah.
Like,
he says, you want to crash a plane? And he's like, well, not from the air. You know, like it's
Right.
it's this kind of, no, let's be reasonable. Let's just crash a plane on the ground into the hangar. It's such a great, I think it's a great heist sequence. I think it's a great action set piece. And I think it leads to that great fight.
right.
The blending of backwards action and forwards action, I have no idea how they did it except for maybe intense choreography of learning backwards movements. It is so good, though.
I have no idea, yeah.
So interesting to watch because your brain is telling you that that's not right.
It's wrong, yeah.
But you're watching, okay, guy in the gas mask, that's not right. John David Washington,
That's right.
And they're clashing, and it does something to your brain that it's an uncanny valley kind of thing, but in the best way possible.
I almost couldn't even tell, like, what is he doing in reverse? Like, what is this?
But then you see it from the other way later in the movie,
sense.
and then John David Washington is the one who's backwards, and oh my god, it's such a wild ride both times that you see the fight.
Right. And the music when it goes in reverse is
I want to talk about the music
favorite
a little
thing.
bit. Go on that because it's so unique. It does sound backwards.
It does. I don't know if it actually is.
I don't know if it is either.
But like really the fight scene at the end, the war, really?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like that is the most amazing use of it. Like when they're flipping between, they've got the two teams, the reconnaissance team, one in the past, one going forward.
You have the one going forward,
one going backward.
So then the one going backwards knows how the forward team plays out, and then they run through backwards and set everything up. And I just confused myself saying that sentence, but
it's confusing. But like the way they make it so clear when they're switching between scenes of like, you can hear the normal action music and you can hear the reverse, like the
right.
It's just really cool. And it's the only time that I think the sound mixing in this works, because this movie is a nightmare to hear. I think.
Yeah, the HBO transfer, I think our bass was up on the TV a little bit too much. I watched this with headphones the second time through, and it clarifies so much. It filters out so much of like the low end. There's you know Nolan, to go back to Inception. Wow, the big he loves that big bassy sound, and what that does, I think sometimes it muddies up. I mean, look at the Bane thing, all the mask stuff. People are wearing masks through this movie, talking on radios, and Nolan doesn't ADR any of that shit. He just uses that audio. So then it's all muddy in the mix, and it's hard to hear sometimes, and it can get very confusing. The other thing I like is that they color coded forwards and backwards.
Yeah,
really
even the
well.
watches, yeah.
The watches, the armbands, but also earlier, when Kenneth Branagh shoots the wife. On his side of the mirror, it's blue. The lighting is blue. And on the other side of the mirror, the lighting is all red. So
I didn't catch that.
Yes, all through the movie, it's all color coded, and I think that's the genius of it, is that you don't catch it and you don't think about it unless it just clicks with you at a certain point if you watch it analytically. But is that he just does that, and I think your brain picks up on it. I think Nolan trusts your brain to pick up on the music, even if you aren't thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he kind of lets you figure it out.
Right. Which
is good in some parts, bad in some parts.
You're not wrong. There's a lot going on in this movie, and I'm not sure how user friendly it is. I think a lot of people who early reviewed this movie and didn't like it, I think some of it was due to expectation about it. I think some of it it was just that. This is kind of a confusing mess on first viewing because there is a complicated spy plot and there's a time travel plot where a lot of times you're not sure where in time you are if they don't take a moment to specifically tell you, yes, we came back 3 days or whatever.
Right, yeah. Like, there's a part in this movie where I'm like, wait, they're going forwards again? Because, like, they literally just don't show you,
Right.
like, when they're on the boat, and I don't know how to explain where in the plot it is, but, like, it shows you the first few times they go, okay, he's inverted now. Now he's going forward again. Now he's inverted. And then, like, they didn't show you that invert.
You're talking about after the airport, the second time the airport.
Yes.
When they're on the ship and the ship's going backwards. But
up until then, we've been going forward.
We had been going backwards, and then they flipped and we're going forwards. They left the airport going forwards.
Yes.
And then you're right. It's a smash cut to them. Does he go to India first?
He does go to India.
He goes to India, and they are they are they're going forwards at that point, and then it smash cuts to the boat. And the boat's going backwards, but he's going forward, and that's a great shot because he had to walk up the stairs backwards when they filmed it. It's so strange.
Okay, yeah. I think you're supposed to, like, piece that together because you see, like, the waves going backwards,
right.
And you see him, like, from the beginning, montage exercising on the other boat.
Right.
But, like, I didn't piece it together, and then, like, I just saw it as, like, B footage, and then I realized later,
right.
And yeah.
It's a show-off shot at the same time.
Right.
But it's so good.
It is good.
And then they're going forwards again, because that's when they're mobilizing all the troops.
Mm-hmm.
So they went back, and then he tells her, he's like, keep going back another day. We're going to invert here. And start going forwards again. It's just like so strange.
I see this movie is really good, but it also messes itself up, I feel like, in ways. Like, the good aspects in one way, like the good spy stuff, kind of hurts the good sci-fi stuff, and vice versa.
A little bit. If you I think it helps me because I've seen so many James Bond movies in my life that I understand the formula of it. And that's all this is. This is just a James Bond movie. And it is like introduction to the woman who's the girlfriend of the big bad guy who's sitting on nukes that Bond has to get. And then it culminates in this giant invasion style, big troops come in. It's a big war. It's a big action set piece that's hard to follow. And that's what this does. But then I think where it trips itself up, and it doesn't trip itself up, it trips the audience up. And that's where I think, like, I'm on the fence.
It doesn't work with us, it works against us.
I am so on the fence because I did like this movie better the second time, and I feel like the more I watch this movie, the more I'm going to like it. But that doesn't mean I think it executes itself flawlessly. Mm-hmm. This is one of those where I'm kind of coming down on it the same way I come down on 2001. I love it. It's very interesting. It brings up a lot of interesting questions and makes me think. But as a narrative, its job to the audience is to communicate with some clarity what's going on and be able to be followed.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean you have to spoon feed it, but I think
it's self-indulgent.
It is a little self-indulgent. I absolutely can't deny that. I think this is Nolan going, Inception wasn't weird enough for you, huh? Well, watch this. And he just kind of turns it up to 11, where I think there's a middle ground in there somewhere. You know, something that is a little wilder than Inception, but still able to be followed in the way that Inception is.
I just realized you could compare this movie to... Okay, so I don't remember the name of the movie, but it's written by, like, an actual physicist.
Oh, Primer.
Primer, yeah.
Primer, yeah.
I was thinking something with printers. Yeah. Primer.
Yes. It's about working at Kinko's.
Yeah, that movie is confusing. It's
For sure, yeah.
It's kind of in the same way.
I had the same kind of flashbacks. I think this is easier to follow than Primer.
Right, because it's not written by someone who knows all the technicalities.
Exactly. It's not a physics or a time engineering lesson. It is a narrative at the same time.
Although, can I praise this movie for, like...
Please.
Using real, like, science? Like, they talk about how...
I think there's a lot there, yeah.
It's reversing, what is it called? The ions of... like, the inverted stuff, and that's why it makes hot things cold,
right.
And, like, I didn't understand that the first viewing, but then, like, I kind of
the explosion,
thought about it.
The explosion that gives him hypothermia because the heat transfer of the explosion pulled all the heat away from him.
Yeah, it took out of his body. That's so cool, and it's, like, kind of like dark matter.
It's
which is
antimatter kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the reverse. It's you can't touch it or you'll die. Like, it's the same concept.
Well, everything about when he first becomes inverted and he goes, I'm going out in the world. And they're like trying to explain to him, like, the physics are different. Gravity is different, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, can I drive a car? They're like, it'll handle different. It's not going to handle the way you expect it to, you know, everything that you know about moving through the world is backwards now.
Wind resistance.
Yes. And he's like, well, how is it? The lady tells him, what's the line? It's something like, you're inverted. The world isn't. Like, you're the backwards one. And it's not working with you, which plays into that bigger plot that Doomsday Machine, the MacGuffin machine, is wanting to invert the entire world.
And the arms dealer in India, she tells him something later in the movie when they're talking about, like, the paradoxes of, oh, if you do this, this will happen. And he, like, outsmarts her, and she goes, oh, now you're thinking in inverted terms.
Right.
Like, now...
You're changing how you see the world.
Yes. Like, it's really... You gotta change your thought process to understand the reality that you're in.
It is so much about mindset, which is an interesting play on time travel. This isn't just changing the mechanics of when you are in space-time. You have to change your perspective in order to just get your head around when you are in space-time. Like, when he walks out and the birds are landing, like, the birds are flying backwards and stuff, like, immediately you're like, oh, that's weird. And then, I don't know if it's just, again, the way he moves, you know, backwards, the way...
He, like, walks through a puddle, all this small stuff.
The way it's shot, everything, you feel disoriented. You feel what he feels. Mm-hmm. This movie is shot in such an interesting way when it's backwards.
It kind of gives you, like, an overload. You're like, make it stop.
Yes, exactly. Which is, I think, appropriate because that Nolan is trying to put you in his... We're trying to see things from his perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think it works so brilliantly. The parts of this movie, like I said, I don't think this movie executes perfectly, and I think it is going to leave some people behind. And I think some people are going to leave this movie, like, hating it.
I think that's okay, too.
I think that's okay, too. But the parts of this movie that work really, really work for me. It's a super interesting movie.
And that's why I want more of the interesting. Like, the sci-fi, I think... I'm biased, okay? But, like... It's infinitely more complex and interesting than this dumb James Bond plot.
But that's when you get... That's what will turn it into Primer. is now it becomes a movie. Like, the part of Primer has almost no plot to it. Primer is just a movie about the mechanics of time travel and how it eats itself. And I think without a plot, I think he had to have... I mean, if you look at the plot of Inception, that plot is simple. Let's implant an idea in this kid's brain. That's it. That's it. It's a heist movie about breaking in and planting something. Everything that happens around it, the mechanics of dreams and the mechanics of the subconscious, that's the complicated part. And I think this is too. I think if you watch this again, you'll follow the plot of the spy thing and go, oh, this is really simple. And then it's just about layering on time travel and time jumps back and forth.
Okay. I see what you're saying. I wasn't invited to the second viewing, so I missed out on that.
I'm sorry.
Some of us have to work, Dad.
Yeah.
I know you have a week off,
That's right.
but we can't all...
That's right. Here, let me, I will say the thing you need to pay attention to is when he goes to Tenet and the scientist there is explaining this stuff.
I liked that scene.
I like that too. She has one line where she goes, "Don't think too hard about it." And that's Christopher Nolan telling the audience, just go along with this, piece it together later, but don't overthink how the mechanics work. And that's the same thing that, have you seen Looper with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, where he's the hitman?
Potentially, but I don't remember it.
Okay, there's a point where his older self, he's hunting his older self.
Okay.
And they sit down and they start talking about the mechanics of time travel. And Bruce Willis, as his older self, goes, "Look, if we get into this, we're going to be laying out straws and doing this goofy diagram shit all day. Don't think..." And that's the same thing. That's Rian Johnson saying, don't think too hard about the paradoxes we're creating. We're telling a story here. And I think that's essentially what... I think the time travel stuff makes a lot of sense when it's broken down here. But I also think Nolan doesn't want you to get too distracted with looking for holes in the logic of it. You know what I mean?
Can I say, this kind of leads into my next topic, because one thing that I think, it doesn't need to be the main focus, but they should have fleshed out a little more, is the paradox of people in the future killing people in the past.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to talk about that because there's this big, I feel like, missed emotional opportunity of... The plot of this movie is basically, time is going forward, right? And we are destroying the environment we live in. And people in the future came up with the technology to reverse time, to essentially turn and
undo the damage.
Not necessarily undo the damage, but undo the people who lived in the past and start living in a reverse. They want to invert the entire time stream.
The entire world, right.
So that they can live backwards and keep the human race going almost. Right. And it's like the desperation there and like the reason behind it's so interesting.
It is.
And I didn't even like fully understand it until I read an article earlier this week, and it like brought that up, and I was like, oh my god, you're right. Like, there's this huge like
there's an environmental aspect to this,
right? But not just like the emotional component of like, I'm trying to do what I can to undo your damage.
Right.
The protagonist in this is in the wrong. Potentially.
Yes.
He is still saving the world. But
saving the world.
Is doomed to end.
The world is doomed to end, but this is the point of it is if they do reverse time, that undoes all of existence. It doesn't fix anything.
No one knows that.
Nobody does know
Probably, but like no one knows for sure.
But also Tenet was created in the future where they potentially would know that.
I guess.
Tenet was created to combat this thing that was happening simultaneously.
Right. It's kind of like in Terminator, like the people who stop the Terminators.
Right. Yeah. Everything comes back. So Tenet is actually going backwards as well. But only combating this one problem. I don't know. I like that they talk about the environmental component of it without making this movie about environmentalism. Without making this a preachy movie. Because that's not what this movie is about.
No, I'm not talking about environment. Like, I am an environmentalist. So, like, I understand.
I'm not. I litter daily.
Okay, well... My point is the emotional component of it should be there a little more. Like, they don't grapple with it. And there's this similar thing with, like, this movie really drew me in the beginning where the protagonist is, like, killed. Like, he's tortured, his teeth are pulled out, and then he takes a cyanide pill and wakes up, and the CIA is like, that was all a test. And he, like, looks horrified, but then he still goes along with it. Like there's these hints of emotional story beats that could really be, like, fleshed out, and I don't want them to overtake the plot of this movie, but, like, I feel like there's a better way to show it and get the audience engaged with these characters.
I feel like I feel the opposite of you. Not the total opposite, but I think that that him going along with it, that him just doing his job, I kind of think that falls right in line with, like, he's a government guy. He's a spook. He's a guy who kills people for a living. Like, this is what he does. It's not about moral judgment or taking a stand one way or the other. But I do like that where he does connect is with people. He connects with Kat. He connects with Neil. His goodbye to Neil at the end is super emotional. He's, like, almost crying because he understands, like, Neil's going off to die now. And that's terrible. And then, like we said, Neil's like, you'll meet me. Like, don't worry. It's this really, he feels bonded to people. But the bigger picture stuff that he's doing, I feel like he does have a disconnect from, and that's what makes him, like, killer spy dude who kicks the shit out of people in the kitchen.
I know it's there. I feel like the only one that worked for me was with the abused wife, like, where he promises her to get rid of the painting, and then he doesn't, and, like, then he feels obligated to help.
Right.
And it kind of becomes this, like, thing for him. Like, I feel like that worked, and the emotional beats there.
Yeah, there's a complicated relationship with her. Yeah. I feel like he's trying to keep a distance, but he also feels like he has to save her.
Right, because he kind of used her.
Yeah.
In the same way that the antagonist used her.
And his outcome with her is very different than also he used what's her name? The Indian woman, the arms dealer. Like, he used her too, and at the end he comes back and murders her. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He comes back and is just like, oh no, we're done. And he's like, what does he say? He says something like, the whole time you thought I was working for you, but I think we both realize that we're both working for me, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he puts her down. You know, he just is like, yeah, I feel like he used both of those women, and one of them he saved, and one of them he killed.
But one of them was also a crooked.
Sure, that's what I'm saying. He made a moral judgment on people at that point. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not on causes, not on big picture saving the world shit. He made a judgment on people.
And I like that.
I like that too. I think it's great.
I don't know. I feel like there was a little more that could have been done.
Probably. We're talking about a pretty packed movie already, but
yeah.
I will throw another movie this reminds me of in terms of timeline is Memento. Have you seen Memento?
I have seen the Brooklyn Nine-Nine parody of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where
it goes backwards?
What? No, that's the when you don't remember anything and you've got all of the
tattoos.
Tattoos, yeah.
Well, the way that movie is shot is it is backwards.
Oh, okay.
It shows you the scene. It shows you the resolution scene, and then it shows you the scene before that, and then it shows you the scene before that. Because this guy has amnesia where, like, every 10 minutes, his brain resets.
So the movie's him piecing together
the movie is you piecing together his journey, seeing from the end, where did he come from, all the way back. And it is very confusing for a while, and then you kind of fall into it. And I feel like the time jumps in this were the same sort of disorienting.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like, we didn't talk about the car chase scene, but like that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was really good.
Like car chase scene, but like that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was really good.
Like the moment I saw like the crashed car, I was like, okay, so we'll get to that later.
Right.
And then we did. And it was cool.
It was great. The every like reveal of like, oh, here comes a car running backwards it's like, oh shit, it's running, the timelines are running into each other.
Yeah, it's getting muddy.
And then like the backwards talking on the radio and through the translate, like all of it just sort of merged together, and it does that disorienting thing, which I think is completely on purpose. And used to great effect to disorient the audience.
It is. And I think the moment where they switch, like, so the ridiculous villain, when he's like, when he shoots the girl, like that scene, I don't know how to explain it. Like, we first see it with the protagonist going normal. And, like, the conversation doesn't make sense, and then it starts to.
Right.
And then we see the bad guy go across, and then we see from his perspective in, like, the future of the timeline, right, but in the past of the movie, where he is doing the negotiation. And from seeing the first bit, it informs the second bit, and so we hear the same words again, but It makes more sense. And then we see the protagonist go through. I don't know. It really works for me, and I just wish that would have come sooner as a way to, like, because that really explained the mechanics of how this movie works better than any exposition would.
That's a super legit complaint. I would say the other version of that we get is the airport fight. But those two ends of it are spaced out. They kind of bookend everything that's happened in the middle of the movie. I get where you're coming from, where it's very confusing up until we see that back-to-back, that comparison. Mm-hmm. The bad guy, by the way, Kenneth Branagh is the bad guy in this. He's great. He's a great Bond villain because he is a legit, like, Shakespearean actor.
He's ridiculous. Yeah.
No, he really is like he's like a very well-renowned, like, classically trained actor.
Wow.
So here
that checks out.
It's what's his name? Picard. Patrick Stewart.
Oh, yes.
And Ian McKellen. I heard them both on Mark Maron's podcast talking about, like, why they do, like, the X-Men movies and Star Trek and things like that. They're like, he's like, you're Shakespearean. Like, you do these kind of nerd culture comic book movies. And they're like, it's big and bold. It's like shit, it's...
Shakespeare is the trash of its day.
Kind of. Not just that it's the trash of its day, but it's over the top and overly poetic, and they're like, and it's costumes, and it's all Patrick Stewart talked about, like, the Bridge of the Enterprise being like a Shakespearean stage, like, in the round. Like, he's like, there's so many parallels to it. So I can see how, like, Kenneth Branagh would be a really great like Bond villain type, where it's over the top and he's chewing scenery. But he does it. He also has like this weird like quietness to him. He's really good in this. He's really fun.
It really like it was cheesy, but it also scared me a little.
It's menacing. Kenneth Branagh, you will know from Murder on the Orient Express. He played the detective Poirot.
Oh wow!
He directed the first Thor movie. He's done a lot of Shakespearean movies.
He's in Harry Potter too, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, because
is he?
Yeah.
Yes, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Looking through it right here. Also in the Will Smith classic Wild Wild West.
He looks different in all of those.
Right. Yes. He's recognizable, but you know, he will also like sort of disappear into things.
Kind of a chameleon.
A little bit.
I really like that Murder on the Orient Express.
I like that movie too. I think that movie is super fun, and I think is he in the next one, Death on the Nile?
I would assume so. They teased it at the end, but like I haven't heard anything production wise coming from that at all.
I saw like a teaser trailer for it, but
did COVID kind of postpone that?
I think so. But I hope he is. 2022 that is looking like, and he is directing that as well.
The movie world is healing.
Excellent. But no, I like Kenneth Branagh a lot, and maybe we will do Murder on the Murder. Oh, he directed Murder on the Orient Express as well.
Oh, directed and starred. I always feel like that's an interesting dynamic, like when you have to action and then run to the camera.
You don't think he calls it from his starting point? You think he's sitting in the chair with the bullhorn? And then he rips his ascot off and runs on the stage.
It's like when you're playing chess with yourself and you gotta run to each side of the board. Yeah,
absolutely. You got anything else on this one? We're talking about other movies and Kenneth Branagh at this point, but
that usually signals
the end of it.
I did want to just like point out, I said this already, but it truly is an exposition nightmare.
There's a ton of exposition.
I think I clocked it when we were like watching it the first time. I was like, this is the fourth exposition scene.
It's a lot, and especially in the first half, I think. But even in the second half, before every action set piece, there is a sit down where they talk it out and they tell you what's going to happen, because I think Nolan kind of knows it's going to be hard to follow, and you're not going to follow the time travel mechanics if we don't sit you down and explain this to you.
I will say, towards the end, like, the exposition, like, there's the obvious exposition of, like, setting up, I need to meet this person to go see the art, but, like, there's smaller stuff like her at the dinner, the wife talking about, like, their trip, and then that becomes relevant later at the...
Oh, yeah,
yeah. Like, they kind of utilize it to the best, but it is just so chock full.
Like, when she there's no reason for her to tell...
A complete stranger.
About her abusive relationship with her husband, who murders people for a living.
Or about her intimate thoughts about seeing a woman jump off the boat and feeling jealous.
Right.
What? I was like, what is this?
Yeah, exactly. But that's the James Bond aspect of it. That is such... When you accept that this is a Bond movie, like, that all makes sense. Because formulaically, that's just how it goes. And you just have to take it that, like... That's where I think the strength of this movie is that it is almost a juxtaposition of a paper-thin James Bond plot against a almost unnecessarily complicated time travel mechanics, and a very weird meshing of those two that works for me on some level.
Yeah. Okay, I just thought of another point that I had earlier, but, like, it slipped away.
Okay.
I like, specifically with the mechanics of this time travel, how it's not, like, not that it's not simple, but that, like, there's a cost to it. Like, you can't just, go to a different point in time. Like you have to go backwards. Like
You have to go in real time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems exhausting.
Right.
Like we hear about how the two spies in this, how like they're supposedly friends in the past. And he's like, you've got all that to come. But then I'm just thinking like, okay, if he meets him like 10 years ago, he's got to go through like 10 years of inverted stuff too. And like, I'm sure he's not doing that all in one road trip. So like, I don't know.
And yeah, I mean, it could be them going back and forth. I mean, we see at the very end, he goes to kill the arms dealer who's there to kill Kat because she calls and leaves a message and then he shows up, which means he came from the future. He inverted himself and came backwards in real time from God knows when.
Right.
Could be years from now. You know, it would have been interesting if he got into the car and was like an old man.
You know what I mean? Would have like, loved that.
Like,
I think that should have happened.
Just sort of been like, yeah, I've been waiting for this call, and you know,
one last loose end to tie up.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, all of the mechanics of it. But you're right, like the idea that time travel is not some quick fix. It's not like, okay, we just jump back, we kill this person, and then we jump back forward. It's a real like, no, you have to live this like life. And you have to live in a weird physics of the world that don't make sense to you.
If you want to go back 5 weeks and not be noticed, you got to sit in a room for 5 weeks.
You got to sit in a room for 5 weeks, right? And it's a really interesting. You keep aging in order to go back. So it's a really.
You try to get winning lottery numbers, but they're in the reverse order, so you get it wrong.
Right. It's a really cool concept, I think. I think Christopher Nolan brought something really original to the time travel genre in this.
Yeah.
And I like it. Do you recommend this movie? Okay, I'll just say,
I don't know.
Not recommend, because this is a hard movie to recommend. It is definitely not for everybody.
It's like when an insurance company is like, would you recommend us? And I'm like, I don't think you would ever come up in conversation. Right. Like, I don't want to recommend someone homework, but I think this is an interesting enough movie that I'll watch it again at some point.
That's great. That's a good review. I did like this movie.
Okay.
I don't know that I would make a blanket recommendation, but somebody who likes sort of intellectual, not that this is intellectual, I don't think it's highfalutin.
No.
It requires you to think about things a little bit.
It's a puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit.
So it's a little mind workout.
In the same way that somebody who likes Ex Machina, like Alex Garland kind of think pieces, science fiction think pieces. If you like that stuff, I think you will, at the very least, find this movie interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would say like this is Nolan's best movie, but I find it among his most interesting movies.
I also want to add, I think I agree with you, but I think this is a movie that I would probably watch if there was like a director's cut, or like if he completely like spliced the movie completely differently, like just played with it,
like chronologically.
Yeah, or like that end fight sequence. I feel like there's a lot of different ways you could play with that, and I feel like it would just be cool to just edit together different clips in different ways. Like I would watch this movie rearranged and spit back out a bunch of different ways.
I'd be more interested in watching like a director's commentary or behind the scenes kind of things. I'm really interested in like the practical, because Nolan loves like practical effects.
Yeah.
And I would be really interested to see how he filmed this movie, because I think it's probably really interesting.
Well, I want to know what's actually in reverse and what's staged and what's
right. That's what I'm talking about. Like the ship's going backwards, and the helicopter shot comes around, and you see John David Washington doing pull-ups, and then he comes down off the pull-up bar and walks up the stairs normally, which means
he's in reverse.
Means when they filmed it, he came down the stairs looking natural, like in the same exact. I mean, it's a weird thing to have to train your body to do.
Take 508.
It's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And I do want to also shout out John David Washington is great in this movie. I think he's super fun. And if you want to see him really being this cool in another movie, Black Klansman. He's great. Him and Adam Driver both freaking awesome in Black Klansman.
That's one of those movies that I just haven't seen, but I need to.
I think you would really, really like it. I think you're a big Adam Driver guy. And I think Adam Driver kind of steals that movie. His character is super, super interesting.
Wow, Dad. Way to give props to the white guy.
You know, honestly,
I'm just kidding.
Look, I am going to say this because Driver was up for an award for that movie, and I don't know that Washington was. And they kind of gave people shit about that. But John David Washington's character he's a black guy trying to infiltrate the Klan. His motivations are very clear. He has some conflict about being a cop and being black at the same, he's a victim of racism. His character is pretty cut and dry. Adam Driver plays a Jew who doesn't want to get involved. His motivations are a little, they kind of play on like, you're Jewish. Don't you care about this? Don't you, and sort of play around. His character, I think, is more complicated and probably more complicated to play. It's not that they both didn't give great performances. I think Adam Driver kind of had the bigger uphill climb as far as like figuring out who this character was and playing the motivations in the right way.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. I haven't seen the movie, but
I would love to see John David Washington get nominated or recognized a little more for that movie too, because the other one that they called out was like, oh, Topher Grace is amazing, and it's like, yeah, Topher Grace is good, but like he's a distant third to those other two. It's a really great movie, and it bugged me watching this. I'm like, where do I know that guy from? And it's like, oh, Black Klansman. Cut the fro down a little bit, and it's there. Yeah.
Has he been in anything else?
His filmography is pretty short. Nothing else that I was familiar with, but
okay.
But
maybe we'll see more of him in the future.
I hope so. He's great in this movie.
Watch him be the next James Bond.
If
Idris Elba, I can never say his name.
Idris Elba's too old now.
If he's not available,
but. Yeah, he could be if they let Americans play James Bond.
Oh, right, he's
I
American.
Kind of get. But yeah, John David Washington. Can't say enough good stuff about him in this.
He's great, yeah.
Smooth
the
operator.
protagonist.
The protagonist. All right, let's close that out, or we will just keep going forever. What do you got, Oss? Let's do some shout-outs.
Shout-outs? Are we doing shout-outs? I was not prepared for this. My shout out is Bill Weathers, who doesn't really need a shout out because he's pretty famous. But my boyfriend sent me a song by him this week because we kind of just send songs back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to it.
Yeah.
But I know so many of his songs, and I just never had put together that they're all by the same person. So Ain't No Sunshine, Lean on Me, Lovely Day. These are good songs that I love listening to. I just have never integrated them into my personal playlists or connected that they're by the same person. So
I was waiting for you to tell me there's some YouTuber named Bill Withers that just completely unreal. I'm like, oh yeah, that Bill Withers. Bill Withers actually really interesting because he kind of got fed up with the bullshit of the music business and kind of left it early. Just said, no, this isn't worth.
Good for him.
And it was, he kind of did it on his own terms. But those songs are just freaking classic. I mean, it's timeless music for sure.
Yeah. Ain't No Sunshine is like
Great song.
one of my top songs.
Absolute great song. Yeah, totally.
So yeah, that's I'm sure it's something that a lot of our listeners probably already know, but it's new to me.
There's nothing wrong with shouting out something new to you, or just reminding people that something classic like that exists. You know, I do that all the time. I'll hear someone will mention a song that I haven't heard in years. That's an absolute classic, and I'll just go like, all right, let me check this out again. And I'll be like, oh my God. It like comes right back.
Give it a fresh listen.
It's great. Yeah.
What do you have this week?
I am going to shout out a new thing called Women on Mic. That is at womenonmic.org. This is my friend Heather Welch. She is put together a collective of women recording audio samples on various microphones, and she has done this because as a podcaster and kind of a aficionado of you know, gear and recording equipment, she looked for reviews of microphones and found a lot of them, but they were done by men. And I think the idea of women tend to have a higher pitch. You know, the different dynamics of a woman's voice as opposed to a man. It's like, oh, this mic works well for a man. Does it do the same thing for? So,
wow.
She recorded on her mic and talked about it, and talks about like, these are the qualities of my voice. I have, she's from New Zealand. She's like, I have a New Zealand accent. This is the mic I use. These are the settings I'm on. And that's what you're hearing right now. And women are starting to record and send in. So that goes on like the YouTube channel and things like that.
That's really interesting.
And it's a really cool way to collect samples for other women to use as a resource when they are looking for a microphone that would suit their voice as opposed to like my voice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I've heard of technology bias, but that's new to me. Like, I've mainly heard about...
I've never thought of that either, of course. Why would I? You know?
I've heard... Because it's not that the technology is, like, discriminatory. It's just, like, the people who made it, like, the test group is predominantly, like, men or white. Like, I've heard of a lot of facial recognition or, like... even like motion sensors searching for like light skin. And so sometimes you get like hand dryers that just straight up cannot detect a black person's hand.
Really?
Yeah, it's really weird. So like stuff like that is interesting. It's cool that she's kind of compiling a sample size of what's the best.
I was really impressed with it because it's like, a lot of people like to complain about holes in the market of one thing or another. And a lot of times I see people who make things complaining about that. And it's like, you make things. Fill the hole in the market. And that's what she did. She got tired of seeing, you know, there's something missing from this space. I'm going to fill it. So I wanted to shout that out.
Do you know if she's planning on making like a list of like the best ones?
I think is...
Or is it just listen and see what the best one for you is?
I think it is a place to hear samples and decide what works for you. That's my understanding of it.
Okay, I'm going to have to check that out.
But if you are... part of the reason I wanted to shout this out is... if you are a woman who records, if you are a woman who has a microphone that you are happy with your voice, please check this out. See about submitting a sample so that you can contribute to making this a broader database for other women. And I know this is women, people who identify as women, trans women, whatever. It all goes into this place and is a place for women with all different voices and all different equipment to be able to kind of shop for a mic, to have a resource for that. So
Yeah, that's really cool.
yeah, please check that out. And if you're a woman with a mic, please contribute and make your voice and your equipment heard there.
Love that.
On that note, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rude. If you enjoy our show, please leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. It helps our visibility. It helps us grow the show.
That's right. Another way to help us grow is to tell friends. But the best part about telling friends is you don't have to tell them in any order. Feel free to tell them in reverse or in the past. Who knows? The possibilities are endless.
A lot of people don't know this.
Very convoluted.
Next week will be when I start going backwards to last summer, and I tell myself to start the podcast.
Oh.
That is the genesis of this podcast.
Okay, see, this is the second podcast episode I've recorded yet. So there's going to be some rusty ones in the past and future.
It's getting real wild there. Austin, you've got the wheel next week. What are we watching?
I do. We are watching Bo Burnham's Inside. Not quite a movie, not quite a comedy special. It's something very unique, and I think it's going to be hard to talk about, so...
Oh, cool.
No, not like... It's going to be...
Can't wait.
It's going to be fun to talk about. It's going to be hard to follow if you haven't seen it, so...
It's on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's streaming, so go watch it ahead of time.
This will be our second Bo Burnham thing.
It will be.
All right. Cool. Social media, what do you got?
I am Austin N. Rude on Twitter and Instagram, and Old Who Review on Twitter if you want to follow my spam account.
More time travel content.
That's right.
From you. Cool.
What about you?
philrude.com, and from there you can get my social media. You can see all the we got all the episodes here. You can buy art. You can buy art from the show. It is all listed there under the original art tab. And I will throw a bunch of extra stuff in that envelope. Ooh. So bonuses around.
Clearing out the art room.
That's right. Everything must go. Austin, you want to read the credits?
Yep. We did everything ourselves.
There you have it. We'll see you next time on The Picture Show.
See ya.